Appearing respectable is not the same as being respectable.
Exactly.
You do fight resistance, fight distraction.
Today we have Magnus Johnson, who is a former Green Beret, founder of Mission 22, and author of The Men We Make.
He shares his journey into writing and the deeper themes of fatherhood, masculinity, and discipline.
If you're not working on your character and you think a six-pack's going to cover that up, you're a fool. But if you're super deep and sensitive and you think that just having some wit and being snarky is going to compensate for providing security, safety in your home, you're also a fool.
You can't get away with just a big paycheck if your body's like shit and your emotions are out of whack and you're spiritually bankrupt.
There's another way of looking at it. It's easy to be a man right now because it's so glaringly obvious what one is not. I had to get rejected a lot. I had to look at people as they read something and see their face, do a micro expression of they're not impressed. And I had to quit making it about me and I had to start thinking about them. You just keep practicing. And then the vulnerability grows, the artistic ability grows, skin gets a little thicker, you have more empathy for others. When you stop thinking about yourself, you're happier too.
The modern man has to bring challenge into his life so that he can grow.
They're using an old model that doesn't work in 2026. Like you had to be stoic, you had to be tough. So you've got this one extreme where there's like these fake alpha that are focused on looking strong, making money, all this shallow shit. And then you've got these very passive, sort of effeminate, hungry for some kind of bearing of what masculinity is. They need to stop doing it for the attention of women and do it for the love of the process to develop character.
Yes.
And I think that is more attractive than trying to be attractive.
If someone feels really inspired by this conversation and they want to take action right away, what can they do? What advice do you have for them? Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Magnus Johnson. He is a former Green Beret. He's the founder of Mission 22, which is an organization that helps with veteran suicide and PTSD, and he's recently written a book. So I'm really excited to hear about your book, Magnus. Can you tell us a little bit about it right off the gate?
Yeah, first of all, hey, thanks for taking me on the podcast. I love the title. I've listened to some of your episodes, and I feel like it's totally relevant to my work and the book. The book is called The Men We Make, and basically it's a story that's told twice in the same book that shows nurture versus nature and how the people in our lives, the decisions they make, not necessarily like if they do great or if they're really horrible, but how much they try, their capacity for love. These small little things that we take for granted greatly alters the course of the protagonist's story in the book. And the book's gotten a lot of, getting some attention from therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, things like that, because it touches on some issues, contemporary issues and deeper ones.
Yeah. I love that. And listeners, if you want to check out the book, we'll have a link to that on Amazon in the show notes. So give it a read. It's pretty powerful. So let's just start with the big question, like why write a book? What inspired you? You said this is your first endeavor doing nonfiction.
When I was younger, I was drawn to literature, drawn to novels. I thought it was so cool, the people, these people that wrote these great books. And then I kind of struggled with a little bit of dyslexia, dysgraphia. I was homeschooled on the road. I grew up in a van and I was homeschooled a lot. And I missed some like really formative years with grammar, phonics, And so I've always had a lot to say and I've always thought about things and observed. But when it came to telling a story or writing, at least, in like literature style, I couldn't quite do it. And so for years of my life, I've been kind of wrestling, dealing with sounding crappy, not having a voice, not having the skills. And then finally, around 44 years old, something in me just kind of switched. And I just had this feeling like, I don't care what people think anymore. I'm going to write it. I'm going to write it my way. And then it came out. So I've always wanted to, and I couldn't. And then I finally could.
Yeah, that's incredible. So it sounds like it was a big personal achievement for you as well.
It was deeply satisfying. I don't think that it's going to be this like ground shaking new thing, but the deep level of satisfaction I got from staying in the process, staying with my character, overcoming insecurities, doubts, getting up every morning and sitting at that computer and like at least getting 500 words for 3-4 months, like that was deeply satisfying.
For sure. Right. And a true practice and discipline. Right. And I imagine you got so much better while doing it.
As the book goes, it's better and better and better, at the end.
I was going to say, you had to like go back to the beginning and write the first few chapters again.
Yeah, it's kind of like an academic paper, where you do all the writing. By the time you've written the end paragraph, that's your intro, But no, it did get a little better, but I think it's pretty solid all the way through.
Yeah, so I'm curious about that process of kind of riffing here of like, well, let me back it up. What I say to a lot of my guys that I think is a superpower that I'm seeing you demonstrate is the ability to be good at being bad at stuff. Because I feel like a lot of men, a lot of people in general, but we're focusing on men, like struggle with starting something new, especially if they've been told growing up that they can't do it or that they're bad at it or they're never going to be an artist or never going to be an author or whatever it is. What keeps you doing that? How do you get good at being bad at stuff?
Dude, that's such a great question. I love being new, because if I'm new, if I don't know everything, then I've got all the cards, right? I can learn, I can be humble, I can be teachable, I can ask stupid questions, I can commit to process. The same thing, like when I was in special forces, when we did selection, every day you don't know what's going to happen. Every moment you're not sure how you're going to react, who's going to quit, what they're going to do. And you get used to this, being in this environment where I'm going to show up with the best attitude I can and be willing. And so over and over my life, anytime I participated in anything that was big or difficult, whether it's building a business, a marriage, parenting, special forces, it's this ongoing great thing that you've got to commit daily to sucking at. But every day you get a little better if you're present. And the thing that really tipped the scales was Stephen Pressfield. He wrote 3 little books, The War of Art, Turning Pro, and Do the Work. And they're just these little books. And they really drive home the fact of whatever you do, fight resistance, fight distraction.
I think those are some of the biggest enemies out there, right? With modern culture, everyone is fighting for our attention, right? Whether it's like your phone, the TV, whatever it is, right? We're constantly, our minds are just getting like shattered in every possible direction.
Well, there's this idea of like instant satisfaction versus delayed gratification. I can get on TikTok or something and get a dopamine hit, but nothing will come of it. I'll not go anywhere. I won't learn anything. My brain is in a passive state. But when I'm trying to do something bigger than myself, or I'm trying to learn a discipline, I have to be in an active state. And I learn and I grow. And it sucks because you have to look in the mirror and you have to wrestle with not knowing what you're saying, not sure, trying again, showing your friends or family, and they're like, you could maybe do better. But when you cross the finish line, at least, well, there's no finish line in life, but when you cross these little finish lines of these projects, you grow. Even if the book's not wonderful or even this or that, it doesn't matter. You've grown. And that's, to me, the point. And that's the practice.
At Men's Therapy Online, we have these kind of 4 pillars. So it's strength, courage, mastery, and honor. And I'm hearing you talk about mastery, which I think is a really, really important one, and it's one of those things that if you find a guy who's a master at anything, I think in modern man, it doesn't have to be like, guns and cars, right? You can be a master of dance or pottery or art or whatever, right? But truly being a master, like an artisan at something, I think is a very masculine trait. Going through that process of learning, confronting yourself, right? Overcoming your resistance, overcoming your fear. So I'm curious, in your pursuit of mastery here, what are some things you learned about yourself? What were something that you saw in the mirror as you were trying to really build a skill from ground zero?
Well, like I was saying, from a childhood, I've always wanted to write a book. And then I've never been great. I was never great at writing, so I had to practice so much. And then I had to get rejected a lot, and I had to look at people as they read something and kind of see their face, do a micro expression of like, they're not impressed. And I had to quit making it about me. And I had to start thinking about them. I had to start thinking about other people. I had to stop thinking about, I want to achieve something and I want to experience the process of becoming something, of participating in something. And then, that strips the ego. And then you don't have anything to prove. And you just keep practicing. And then the vulnerability grows, the artistic ability grows, your skin gets a little thicker, you have more empathy for others. I don't know, there's so many things we could talk about when you bring that up. Maybe take it deeper. What other question you have with that? Because there's I think my mind's going everywhere with all the answers.
Well, the last thing you said, actually, the empathy for others, I'm curious about that. Because we interviewed a few authors, but not many that have written fiction. And from my novice understanding of in writing fiction, developing characters, you really have to work this empathy skill, right? Because you're trying to write someone that's not you. So you're trying to figure out, okay, how would this character deal with a certain situation? I'm curious if you can dig in a little bit on that.
Well, yeah, some of it might be natural depending on a person's personality. Maybe you could look at trauma, like people that have experienced a lot of trauma really pay attention. They got to read the room, they got to anticipate. There's some of that too, but I think also from like just a good place. When you if you have a headache and all you think about is I have a headache, I got a headache, I got to get rid of my headache. Someone says, hey, you want an aspirin? You're like, yeah, and you take it, and then your headache's gone and you're good. But it's the entrepreneur, or it's the empathetic, or the person that cares for somebody else that invented the Advil, invented the aspirin. They solved a problem because they wondered what it was like for somebody else. They understood, if I'm having this problem, so is somebody else. And that empathy, that vulnerability, if you observe it, if you pay attention to it, if you lean into it, it can unlock all kinds of creative, entrepreneurial, and business ideas. Because a lot of people think successful people are just self-centered, greedy, gluttonous, and all that. And rightfully so, some of them are. But a lot of them started out thinking about others, thinking about how to solve other people's problems. What do other people feel when they hear this or they hear that? So it's a fine line of keeping your own voice, not losing yourself in like being worried about everyone else, but being aware of it and giving a damn, and then not forgetting. Like that adds a lot of contour and texture and depth to our lives. And then you can apply that to your art or your business or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, truly being, I think, courageous enough to open yourself up and to think beyond just, the tip of your nose, right? Being able to try to see what's going on for other people. And like you were saying, from business perspective, trying to solve other people's problems, trying to make the world a little bit of a better place.
Well, it's just when you stop thinking about yourself, you're happier too. Usually when I'm like resentful, bitter, overwhelmed, I'm thinking about how this sucks or this problem or that problem. My world gets really small. But when I start thinking about, well, I wonder how it's affecting that other person, or I wonder what they think about it, all of a sudden I connect to them, I hear them, I listen to their stories, their feelings, their thoughts, and my aperture, the window gets a little bigger, and now I can see a situation from multiple vantage points, which gives me more wisdom. So empathy also makes you wiser. There's a lot of reasons to have empathy besides just being sensitive, because that's kind of what a lot of people, quarantined it into, but it's actually a superpower, like Brene Brown says.
Yeah, well, I think it dovetails nicely into the theme of the book, right? Which is how we get impacted by others. So I'm curious in the book, and of course not spoiling it, we want people to go out and read it, right? But who were some of the characters that impact your protagonist? You've mentioned how you have these two parallel stories, right? Where the protagonist is getting impacted different ways by people in his lives.
Yeah, so he's got his aunt's husband / boyfriend, an uncle, and some peers, and then also, people in the system like therapists, police officer. So different people in different aspects of mental health and the police system, stuff like that. There's some are minor roles and some are larger roles, and some are more over the top and some are just a little bit. But these little, like, I amplify the selfishness of my characters in part one, and it's like egregious and it's obvious. But then in part two, I minimize the good things. I don't make them all great, wonderful people. They still have the same nature, the same potential of their nature to be good or bad, but they choose to apply themselves with the capacity they have to be a little better, to make a little bit different of a situation, a decision. And I think of shooting. I'm a former Green Beret, so when you shoot, if you're off by a little, further away, as the bullet travels farther and farther, you're off by a mile. And so the effort we put up front can get us closer or furthest away from the hitting the target. And it doesn't have to be these grand gestures. We don't have to be psychologists or theologians or social workers. We can literally just have empathy, care, listen, and try a little harder the next day. And it can have a profound impact.
Yeah, I'm curious that you brought up like aunts and uncles, right? Not parents. And I think that's a question that doesn't get asked much. And I'm curious your answer to it is, what is the role of an aunt or an uncle? When you're dealing with like your niece and your nephew, because to your point, you only really get to see them, not that often, right? You're not their parent. Maybe you see them a few times a year. But what are some of those like little things that you can do, to your point, right, to like help nudge them in the right direction or make them a better person?
Well, the reason I kind of thought about that and some of the stuff is that, like, in modern society, you've got one parent or two, or a mixed family with, stepmom, stepdad, whatever. But it's pretty rare, depending on where you live, to have like cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. Like it's not 1950. We're not on the farm. And so I wanted to show more of an extended family having an impact because there was so much potential for them to be great. Now in part one, they're not. And so these minor characters, I wanted people to reflect on themselves because we have a minor part to play in other people's lives, whether it's a boss, a friend, you know, you work out with somebody at the gym, whatever it is. We all play these little minor parts in people's lives. And usually when we're focused on ourselves, we miss the cues. We miss moments of pain. We miss moments of joy. We don't celebrate with it. We're like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's great. And we focus back on ourselves. And so I wanted to have these characters that weren't exactly like mom and dad, because that role is genetic. You could argue divine. You could argue that there's a lot of ways to look at the role of mom and dad, and it's the connection between the child. But with aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, that's more of a choice. So it has to be a conscious decision for some, unless they're very family oriented. It has to be a conscious decision to be active in somebody else's life.
So I'm curious if you have any advice to those aunts and uncles out there, you know, or those extended family members, like what can they do? What are some of those small acts that they can take?
It's not necessarily the what, it's the present. You know, like a niece or nephew calls you, pick up the phone, call them back. You know, if you got a family member in Oregon, but you live in Texas, and a cousin or something is like trying to talk to you, we get so busy wrapped up in our days, like, oh, I'll call him right back. I'll call him right back. A lot of times we don't, and the years pass by. And then, you know, as we get older, we like, oh yeah, I remember when you were just a kid, and you try to rebuild that relationship, but it's too late. You know, the time's already gone by. The opportunity's lost. So I would say never miss an opportunity to cultivate a relationship, at least with some presence. You know, I think a really good example is when my son is bored and I'm tired, and he'll be like, Dad, check this out. Look at this. I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah. I'm kind of dismissing him. And this could go on for like half an hour if I'm being honest, you know, but if I just put down what I'm doing, look at him like it's my favorite movie in the world. I've never seen anything more amazing. You know, he gets that attention for like 10 minutes. He's good. So it's not the volume or the great grand gestures. It's the genuine attention focus. And you can have smaller doses of that are more impactful.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is like it's connection, it's meaning, right? It's feeling like they belong. And I feel like so many men, especially the young guys out there, often don't feel like they belong. You know, I think they're really isolated. I think they're not part of larger communities. They're not really getting involved in organizations, right? Like they have their job, you know, maybe they go to the gym, but they're not talking to anyone there. You know, they got the headphones in and listen to hopefully this podcast, you know, but I think a lot of guys are really isolated. And I know veterans are too, right? But I'm curious your thoughts on the male loneliness epidemic and crisis. Like it's like out there.
You've got a significant more suicide with men, death of despair, alcoholism, addiction, loneliness. A lot of this happens after divorce. You know, my mother told me a long time ago, men cry before the marriage is over, or women cry before the marriage is over, men cry when it is over. Right. So like they're kind of checked out. I also think, you know, there's really not a rite of passage. We've modernized, you know, this is my opinions, but like women talk more, women communicate more. They're driving the market. They're driving consumerism. They're driving literature. They're on groups. They're on forums. They're like talking, communicating, you know, whereas men are kind of isolated. They're using an old like model that doesn't work in 2026. So like when I think back on my dad and some of the men in my life, like you had to be stoic, you had to be tough, you had to deal with the cold, you had to deal with fear, you had to deal with long hours, and you had to develop this sort of thick skin to be able to deal with it. And that got passed on, but then the world changed, unless you're still like, you know, in some rural area or something. And so out of love or out of wanting their sons to be able to survive and thrive, a lot of things got taught and passed down that don't really apply in 2026. And it hasn't been updated. But then you got these other men that are like really feminizing themselves because they're being taught and told and explained like, hey, this is how you'll be accepted. This is how, like, you'll be safe, you'll be comfortable, you won't, no one will be upset by you, whatever. So they've kind of conditioned themselves to that. And I think that leaves them pretty unhappy too. So you've got this one extreme where there's like these fake alpha that are focused on like looking strong, making money, all this shallow shit. And then you've got these like very passive, sort of effeminate that are hungry for like some kind of bearing of what masculinity is. And I think they're both missing the mark. To me, masculinity, manhood is about sacrificial love. It's about consistency, showing up, being present, willing to take on responsibility, willing to take on burden. It's not necessarily like, coming home with money. I mean, yeah, you want it, you need to provide, but that's not the extent of the value. Like if families without dads, it's been proven that the kids do much worse academically, get in trouble with the law. I mean, there's so many more roles of a dad other than just providing or being passive. That's a long answer, but I've thought about it a lot.
Oh no, I want to keep hearing about it, So I think, back to those pillars, you're talking about honor right there, right? Being an honorable man, which is more than just money, right? It's about ethic. It's about being a good person, but it's also about standing up for yourself. And I'm curious, like in your story, do you learn that sense of honor? Like, was that from the military? Was that after? Did you have that growing up? Like, how did you figure out how to be that midpoint, between like the doormat nice guy and the fake asshole?
I mean, I'm still working on it and I didn't figure it out. It's an ongoing evolution. And I'd be remiss to say that when I was a young soldier that I was like this even keeled, I learned it through trial and error. I learned it through discipline. I learned it through consequences of my actions. I learned it through religious practice, modeling after what I believe is what God's design. I learned it from watching other men be extremely courageous under great duress and still maintaining their ethics. I learned it from spending time with my mother and her husband out doing work, how he treated her, how he treated his friends, how he wasn't ever late, how he always helped the men around him. But I also, he also wouldn't take anything off him. This is like Montana, Alaska, this is like rougher times, old, like before the internet, and he's willing to fight, but he's also fixing the guy's truck, and I think we learn by watching, modeling the people in our lives. We learn deeply, we learn intellectually, we can read books and all that, but it's not the same as like when you learn with your gut and your heart. And then I had some character flaws that I had to be willing to look at. And when I started addressing those character flaws, underneath those character flaws was real ethics, humility, things I had to wrestle with that I didn't want to because I was covering them up with bravado, with courage. I say something all the time. It was easier for me to take a village, meaning like be in a combat zone and deal with insurgents. It was easier to do that than sometimes to be like, I'm sorry, or I don't know what I'm doing, or really listening when someone's really hurt and I'm taking it personal and not get defensive, but also not be a doormat. And like that is the hardest thing in the world, I think, for me.
That is the hardest thing. Like just actually listening and actually trying to integrate something. Because even the guys that like are quick to apologize, often that is just dismissing in another way, right? And I've done that, right? It's like, oh, sorry, my mistake, blah, blah, blah. Right? But you're just like putting up a smoke screen to push that person away, right? To be like, okay, just like get off my back. You're telling them to shut up, nicely, but you're telling them to shut up.
Or you think you're listening, and there's levels of listening. There's like, I forget what they're called. They have names, but there's listening like I hear your words. Then there's listening where like I hear the words and I'm kind of understanding the emotion behind them. And then there's listening where I hear you, hear myself, see what's between us and see what it is you're trying to say and what you're saying. And I'm showing you that I hear you, how I reflect it back to you. And there's like a heart connection there. And like that, you can't fake that. You can try if you're like a narcissist or something, but they're going to find you out sooner or later,
Yeah, if you're a master manipulator. But yeah, you can't fake it. Like you have to be there, And yeah, and like it makes you think of the book, right? Like the idea that I'm assuming your character in the second part finds some male mentors. I think that really is lacking, especially for a lot of the young guys, my generation, millennials, and especially, Gen Z growing up in houses of divorce, right? Like not only do we not grow up with a dad or maybe, every couple weekends, but often, because our moms were hurt, they're demonizing the man, right? They're saying, oh, don't be like your father. Your dad was an asshole. He did X, Y, and Z wrong. So you get these guys that are really confused about what it even means to be a man.
Well, I think of like war, whatever country loses, the other country tells a story, and my book isn't easy on women and it's not easy on men. And guys get a bad rap because they're, usually it's them that it does the violence, right? But like, we don't really look at the codependency of the woman. We don't really look at what creates these two people to come together and create this environment. And then the split off happens and the man leaves or is pushed on or whatever. And then the narrative comes from the mother, from her worldview, from her feelings, from what she's hearing from her friends. And, the other tricky part is they're not entirely wrong. Men do have problems. Men have done a lot of horrible things. A lot of violence is done by men. But it's not, they're not, it's men and women. It's both. It takes both. When I think of like arguments I've had with my spouse, only she knows how to cut me deep. Other people, I could care less what they say, but men bear the burden of responsibility because of the result of the final actions. But we would all do better if we all bear the burden of every little piece that goes into this stew that we end up all eating.
That's very well said. A lot of the guys that I'm working with men's therapy online are a lot of our divorcees, and they often like did the thing, right? They had that really shitty night where they got too angry and they did something they regret, right? Or they had an affair or they start drinking way too much, but there's always two sides to the story. And I think it's important to acknowledge that for these guys is that you're not the villain. Do you have some character flaws you need to work on? 100%. Come to therapy, give us a call. But it doesn't mean that you're a bad, evil person. But I see so many guys like have one bad night and then their whole sense of self, they just start spiraling downwards.
Well, and then, in my experience, because, my mom got divorced and I'm 45 and I've been around a little bit. My mother told me a long time ago, because my dad had a problem with drinking and this, and she said that, she's like, after it was all over and all the years had gone by, it was my pride that helped build this situation. She thought she could change him. She thought she could control him. And then when he couldn't do what she was saying, when he didn't change because of the love for her, it took her so many years to realize that her own pride was a catalyst in a lot of this stuff. And it took her, she's 70 now, to come to terms with that. Because the whole time in her mind and the stories and everything, he was the bad guy. And the answer is yes, he was. Yes, he was a bad guy. But she was wiser, more emotionally intelligent. She knew what she was doing to a degree, but she had blinded herself with her pride and her self-centeredness, and it contributed to a lot of toxic stuff. But she's not the bad one because, like what you just said. So I think it's super tricky, and I think we all have to really look at ourselves. And a lot of people aren't willing to really look because I think a lot of women need to like degrade a man until they've made him so little in their eyes that they can leave. And then when that finally happens, and then now they're like, okay, you're nothing, and like they're done. And a lot of men don't ever see it coming because they're not paying attention, they're not listening, they're arrogant, they're prideful, whatever it is, they don't see it coming. But when it finally hits them, it hits them like a back truck.
Yeah, and all that respect, everything goes out the window. And I think, what you're saying, right, is like people need humility, right? It's like we're both creating something here. Maybe it's not 50-50, it often isn't, but even if it's 80-20, right? Like we can do it. Yeah, exactly. It's
like 80-20, 0-100, 50-50. It's never always 50-50. It's literally like this sliding thing. And there's been periods in my marriage, I've been the same woman 15 years. For like a couple of years, she was pulling 80%. And then there was a few periods where I'm pulling 80%, for more than like the day, for a couple of years. And so, we want to be content. We want to grow. We want to create a stable environment where both of us can experience the full versions of ourselves with each other. I'm not with her to just make me happy. Like, that's silly. You know, like, oh, I'm not happy. You know, like, whatever, dude. Nobody can do that for you. She gives me an opportunity to work on my crap. And I'm giving her an opportunity to work on her crap. And together it's kind of like a sanctification thing.
I'm curious if you can talk more about that, especially like, how do I say this? When you choose to marry somebody, right? And you choose to build a family and you choose to have kids, it's about more than just, is the sex good and are we happy and having fun? I think that's important, super important in dating. And when you're younger, like do that. That's super great. But I feel like a lot of guys and a lot of women, a lot of people in general, we don't get that like greater mission, right? The idea of like starting a business together as a family, right? Or building something greater. So I'm curious if you can speak on that from your own experience or from what you see from guys.
Like hard parts of my marriage, I thought about unborn grandchildren. I'm like, oh, okay, there's going to be a human generations from now that's related to me, and his or her life will be altered by my convictions, my word, my commitments, and their well-being, their hopes, their aspirations. It's not all contingent on me, but I have a part to play. So when I think of marriage, I don't think about like me and my wife. I think of the community we're in, the children we raise, when those children become adults, who they marry, the children they have. Like I'm a part of this legacy, a part of this sacred history of like real people's lives with misery, pain, and grief, and hope, and joy. And like I want the part I play to be there, to be a constant, to be a theme where it wasn't my doing that disrupted everything. I mean, at least not willingly. And so I think generationally, and I don't think just like, am I happy? Does she make me happy? It's like, well, I've been single, and there's a lot of periods where I wasn't happy single. And I didn't question whether or not I was making myself happy. I can't divorce myself when I don't make myself happy. It's silly when you really think about it from more of like a bird's eye view.
Yeah, there's gonna be times where you're not happy. I want to ask you about fatherhood, and specifically, like I guess a couple things. I'll start with one question. I'm curious if writing this book changed the way you parent your son. I think I heard correctly when you said that you have a son, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering, this book is about raising a boy, right, into a man. So I'm curious if it impacted the way that you parent.
Writing the book didn't, but the thoughts that went into writing the book absolutely have. I grew up pretty rough, and I realized not like, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, that if I'm going to alter the course of my family, it has to start with me, and it can't start later. Meaning like, you have to circumnavigate some of the traumas, some of the problems, some of the what's the word? Probably better than I do, like the relationship styles,
attachment styles.
Yeah, attachment styles.
Yeah.
I realized like I've got to do all this work before the kid comes. And then once I see the kids, he's watching me, and I can tell he's modeling after me, and he reminds me of my dad. And I remind me of my dad as I'm parenting him, and I'm seeing how interconnected we are. And what it changed for me writing this book, because I really thought about my own father more. His childhood was rougher than mine. Is I can help redeem his story. No, I can't save him. I'm not going to make him a better person, but the legacy of it, I can help redeem that by being thoughtful of it, by being conscious of it, and by, metacognition, like thinking about what I'm saying, not just saying things. Like, why am I doing this? What is happening when I say this? And so the book got me thinking generationally, and it got me thinking more about thinking that you can work on your business or you can work in your business, right? So like your podcast, you're working in it right now, but when the podcast is over, you're editing, you're emailing people, you're working on it. So I try to think about working on being a father rather than just being a father, if that makes sense. Like an architect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious if you can zoom in on that a little bit, because you're just adding a strategic layer, right? A level of intentionality. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you try to pass on to your kid, or some values or principles that you try to have in your family?
Well, some like super basic stuff. Like he lied to me the other night. He went and got candy, and he's lied a few times about candy, and super long talk about, what is love built on? And I ask him a series of questions, and it gets down to like on trust. I'm like, okay, the boy who cried wolf, what happens when you say something, but there's no trust? He's like, well, then you won't believe me. I'm like, yeah, but if I don't believe you, what? So I talk him through, I make him answer and think about all these things. And then there's some real basic stuff. Like I taught him to box, as soon as he could read, or not read, as soon as I could, I taught him to read, and I passed on the love of books. He was getting bullied, and I worked with him until he found the courage, the right time, the right place to stand up to himself and face his bully. I bring him to church. We go on walks all the time, and we play this imagination game. We're always like some sort of like space rangers, outlaws, whatever. We're always on some mission. And I love to cultivate his imagination, his pattern recognition, his curiosity, and build up his like internal bearing. Like his mom was pounding pickets for some reason. I don't know. I came home, she's pounding pickets, and she hit herself with the picket pounder. And he calmly is like, well, I'm going to go get dad. And he's little, but he knew, don't freak out, go get help. And he immediately went into action. And so I guess the biggest thing I'm kind of externally thinking here, but the biggest thing I teach him is how to be present, how to be curious, how to be disciplined, and then why. Not just do it because I say so, but why? Why is lying bad? Well, not because I'm your dad. I mean, yeah, it's part of it, but why does that matter? It's like, well, because we have a really cool relationship that's built on trust. And when I lie or you lie, it erodes that trust, and we're less of men. Our word doesn't mean as much, and we're not as powerful. And so it's this long thing, but I probably talk to him too much about it, but it gets him thinking.
I like that you go a level deeper, right? It's not just about authority. It's about what kind of man do you want to be, and what do you respect in me, and what do you expect in other men, and can you cultivate that for yourself? So you grew up to be a respectable and dependable man.
Yeah, appearing respectable is not the same thing as being respectable, and it really matters. Because if you don't respect yourself, if you are not a man of your word to yourself, if you're not practicing that, you'll always cave. You'll always take the path of least resistance. You'll make fear-based decisions because you don't have character. And when you make fear-based decisions, that's not masculine, in my opinion. Now there's decisions that are fearful, and we have to overcome fear. But we make a decision out of altruism, out of character, out of ethics, out of values, not out of fear. Right? He made a decision out of fear to lie because he knew he wasn't supposed to. So then he lied again. Now he's stuck in this lie cycle. And, I had to talk all that out. But I was tired. This is what I want to say. I was tired. This is the last thing I wanted to do, was be lied to and then have like this ethical discussion. I wanted to go to bed. But it was that important to me that I didn't just dismiss it, go to bed, whatever. Because I never want to miss those little moments where his character is being developed. Because once that's formed, it's pretty hard to change. Maybe you can know better, or you're a psychotherapist, right? Like, yeah, you tell me how easy is it to change your character after, like, later in life?
Not easy, right? It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, you got to like a lot of habit work to change. So I'm trying to help him not develop these things so they're not entrenched. So at least he has these like good attributes that he can begin life with. There'll be a lot of mistakes along the way, but at least he can think about why.
And he can make his own mistakes and learn from them, right? Like recover from them, instead of being overly dependent on external meaning. It sounds like you're doing a great job of really planting seeds and building that value structure that hopefully will carry him through the rest of his life.
I mean, it's one of the bigger things I'm excited about, because it's cool to go and like shoot hoops or whatever, but like he's smart enough and willing enough and curious enough to have these like deeper conversations because he wants to know. And in my mind, he's like building up what he thinks is good. And he's like arranging the furniture in his mind about what is a good man. And we have explicit conversations about like, hey, that is not manly. To lie and sneak around your dad isn't like, confront me, like stand tall and tell me, because I wanted it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like try to make a good case for the candy. Like if he could actually convince you, you'd probably respect that.
I mean, I would have respected a lot more than him sneaking off when I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Nothing," and I can tell he's got candy in his mouth. But yeah, because it's gonna get to a point where he's gonna confront me, or he's gonna need to like differentiate, I think is the word. And I'm all about it, man. But you better bring it.
Yeah, you better come to the table. Yeah, how old is he now? How old's your kid? 10. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that's actually kind of around the precipice, because my next question is, I think it's really hard to be a man right now, right? There's like so much shit in media. There's so much stuff out there, kind of what we said before, of either moving people towards this like fake alpha hustle culture dude, right? Or this complete effeminate doormat, nice guy. So I'm curious, like, is he starting to get exposed to that being 10? Maybe it's a little early, but I imagine, internet's out there. Other people are out there.
I curated a little bit, man. Like he was in school and they were getting in trouble for playing tag. And then, they got to the point where like they couldn't touch, like because they're tag and all this. And then it got, this all the teachers are women. And then, to me, it got to the point I'm like, all right, this is like a crappy environment. My son's got a high IQ. He wants to play. He wants to go. And they're overstaffed. They're overwhelmed. And boys are the problem because they have more energy. And, you have more experience in this, but like, I think for a while, ADD was sort of what everyone got diagnosed with if there were a problem. I think it's autism now.
Yes. This is another fad diagnosis.
But like, I'm not going to let them do that to him.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So we're homeschooling him, but we still get them out in the world, and we still do co-ops and meetups and groups. We don't isolate them. But I think when you talk about it's hard to be a man right now, there's another way of looking at it. It's easy to be a man right now because it's so glaringly obvious what one is not. There's so many opportunities to practice restraint, to practice humility, to practice character, discipline. Because culturally, not a lot of popularity. School, academically, men are falling behind. There's so many areas where men are falling behind. And not only that, they're also being blamed for everything that's happening. And you can get into the argument about like the chicken and the egg, okay. Like when my mom was coming up, men were treating women really bad. 2026, I think I see a lot of people treating a lot of people really bad. So I'm choosing to use this time where I'm not popular. People don't want to hear what I have to say. Agents aren't looking for masculine books. They're looking for feminist books. I'm using this as an opportunity to really sharpen my sword because it's so obvious. It's so important right now to try to embody the good characteristics of a man and let your actions and let your persistence and let your attitude be a mirror to other people, so they have to reconcile how wrong they are. So I'm looking at it another angle because it is not like it was before, but it's more imperative that we work even harder because it's not good, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, I think there is like there's like a lowest common denominator that we can fall into.
Yeah, and like, dude, what a great opportunity! Like, my dad didn't have the internet, but I got the internet. He can't Google and research everything about autism or ADHD or this or that. He could just, maybe read a book, probably not. So we're at this opportunity where we get to be strong, but we can be intelligent, where we can be masculine, but we can also be thoughtful, where we can be creative. We can write a paper, but we also can change the tire. If someone's going to break into the house, I'm the one that goes to the door. But it's not like I'm out in the field all day and it's beneath me to wash a dish. There's some shared responsibilities that, in the past maybe weren't the same. But I look at it as an opportunity to be a Renaissance man and have like this real breadth of character and things that you can get exposed to and do and learn about. And I think if you're pigeonholing yourself into being like super academic intellectual, or like, I don't do that, or like, you're missing this opportunity that we live in to have a full experience.
Yeah, I'm curious if you can speak more to that and maybe using your son or the character in the book as an example, right? But like, what is required of the modern man? Because I agree with what you said earlier, right? It's like the world has changed, but we still need to be men in that new world, right? We can't just like fall back or become this kind of mushy thing in the middle.
So like in my world, I'm expected to sacrifice if any danger, any threat, any issue. I'm the one that's going to sacrifice. There's no question about it. It just is. I'm expected to take responsibility for the decisions we come with. So like my wife and I will talk and talk and talk. And then it'll come to a point where we have to make a big decision. And then she abdicates to me. She chooses to, and I take that responsibility. But then I'm responsible for it. So if it fails, if it's a disaster, or if it's successful, I am responsible. But then if it's a success, like everyone else gets to celebrate. So, but it's not like I'm this stoic leader and we're out on the prairie and like everyone's incapable and I will get us across the Rockies because I'm an experienced frontiersman and trapper. Like my wife is brilliant. She's super bright. She knows a lot of stuff. We have a lot of dialogue and counsel back and forth. But in our family, I'm responsible for how the family, like what we do, like the course we set, I'm responsible. That doesn't mean I have to micromanage everything. It just means that we've decided that she's going to support me in these bigger decisions because of the responsibility. And I'm going to support her and make sure all the things in the immediate future, the needs in the immediate now are provided. But she also works and I work and we both contribute to the household and all kinds of stuff. So I think a modern man needs to be more of a Renaissance man. I think the age of being just a specialist, I think it's still important in some aspects, but I think we need to be more of a Renaissance man. I think you should be able to play chess, fist fight, write an academic paper, and sing a song. You know what I mean? That's cool. Like that's interesting to me. But like like I'm a coder, all I do is code, but I make $200,000 or $300, $400, whatever, coding. Like that sounds really boring. It doesn't sound exciting to me. I think our economy is changing. If you look back at like medieval peasants, a man and a wife lived on less than $1 a day, depending on when in medieval history, and they eked it out and they relied on each other and they fought together and they wrestled together and they made it. Well, not all of them made it, but the ones that did make it made it, and they had to do it together. And I think the way the world is and the economy and the divisiveness in it, men and women are going to have to become true partners, and they're going to have to negotiate. And it's an ongoing negotiation of leadership, responsibility, as long as you keep earning it. You got to earn it. You got to deliver. And I don't mean just bringing home money. I mean like telling the truth, being dependable. But I think in some ways we're kind of regressing to sort of this like weird, futuristic, medieval thing. And I see a growth in the family unit. I see a reliance on the family unit. And I think your podcast is part of that, where people are sort of like, okay, like the chips are down, things are getting weird. Like I got to figure it out. So that's my answer to that.
I think times are getting challenging, but I think in challenging times, we need good men to rise and face those challenges, right? And to be open to facing those challenges to make yourself a better man. I do think for a while it's been too easy, right? You could just order everything on Amazon and get DoorDash and just not interact with the world and not face real challenges, whether they're physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, whatever it is. But I think the modern man has to bring challenge into his life so that he can grow.
Well, I think, again, I bring up the medieval times. So the industrial age, people went from the farms and moved to the cities. That turned everything upside down, right? But when they were out in the fields and the farms, there was a division of work. Everybody's working their butt off. They're only making it because they're doing it together. You needed each other. So there's the first iteration of that in modern history. And then you had the 1950s where it's after World War II. There's a huge economic boom. There's all these dishwashers, toasters, suburbia. You have this sci-fi, but humans don't change that fast. And so men had this authoritarianism that lasted over from when they were out in the farms and the fields, but it's now they're in the suburb. Well, then women, rightfully so, started questioning like, hey, you're gone at work, you're partying, you're doing all this, and I'm at home. I got all this free time because there's dishwashers, there's stoves, the times changed, the environment changed, but the men didn't update. And I think the backlash we're having today is because for 20, 30 years, we weren't operating in reality. And this is a self-correcting issue. That's how I see it, kind of like as a bigger thing.
I think that's true. And I think like there's been, people like you and me out there trying to be that new change. I think there's like louder guys, unfortunately, that are in like kind of the death cry. They're still trying to hold on to that old way. But I think that that's temporary. I think there's a lot of guys that are lost. So hopefully that like, the show, your book, we can get out there and start to talk to those guys in the middle that are just kind of confused. I think there's a lot of guys that are really confused right now.
Well, I think when you look at there's like these certain personalities where they're bigger than life. I got a 6-pack. I fight every day. You got to earn, they're not totally wrong. I forget what the study is, but and maybe you can speak to this more, but this is anecdotally, but I think there was a study where they showed 100 pictures of men to women, and the women picked like less than 50% that they would be willing to go on a date with or something. I forget the exact numbers. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It was like abysmally low. Yeah.
Yes. But then you flip it around and it wasn't.
Yes.
And so you get these guys, these guys that are like talking about this, like there's some truth to it, but the way they're doing it's so lame. And it's a horrible example because it's so superficial. Like I am strong, I have tenacity, all that, because I'm willing to sacrifice and fight for the ones I love. Not so I can like be the alpha at the gym. Like that's petty. But I need to be a man that a woman respects. I need to be disciplined. I need to work. I can't just take it for granted because it'll be taken from me. Not because I got to be all like the top dog, but because there's a reality that like everyone's going to die. We're all getting older and we have to be strong emotionally, spiritually, mentally, all these things. But the motivation can't be for like superficial stuff. Because for me, that's not enough motive. It's too materialistic. It's too surface. It doesn't matter. But they're not completely wrong. And I think that's what's so irksome about it. Because you look at a guy and he's like, yeah, get in the gym, do this stuff. And then you're like, man, I just did 12 hours. I've written 12 papers, like this, that, and the other. And so then we like get annoyed and be like, yeah, it's fake. Well, a lot of it is fake, but a lot of it's also not. So I think good men need to stop letting these two extremes set the tone, the bar, the standard of what masculinity is. Because it's a parody, man.
I agree. Like I think it's shallow and fake, and it's their job, but it hits on stuff that like men need, right? Like you said, like respecting your body, like being healthy is good. You should be strong. You should be fit. You should be able to run. Like these are critical things to being a human animal. And like discipline is good. Where I'm going with it is like, I think modern women are conditioned to like those guys and be attracted to those guys. And I think it works in the short term. It will get you laid, but it won't make you a man and it won't make you a father. And it won't let those relationships last much longer than a few months, maybe a year. Like there's another level that you need to attain beyond just like getting jacked.
When I think of like fitness, now that I work out a lot, I've always been active, but because I've always been active, it's a small part of my life, right? But if you've never been active, it's a big thing to get in, like to get that into motion. And that can build a ton of confidence. And when you have no confidence and you start gaining confidence on something like that, it can make you superficial. It's very easy to be like, oh, I got in shape. Now I have confidence. And then forget about all the character, all the reasons, it's like you're sort of making yourself a scarecrow. Like if you're not working on your character, if you're not working on your like deep identity, like honing who you are in your soul, and you think a 6-pack's going to cover that up, you're a fool. But if you're super deep and sensitive and you think that just having some wit and being snarky is going to compensate for like providing security, safety in your home, you're also a fool.
one of the truths is that I think women are demanding more. I think they have the right to demand more. And that means that men need to step up more, right? It's not as easy. You can't get away with just a big paycheck if your body's like shit and your emotions are out of whack and you're spiritually bankrupt, right? Like you need to be more of the full package, I think, to really live a successful life.
Well, and I think they need to stop doing it for the attention of women and do it for the love of the process to develop character. And I think that is more attractive than trying to be attractive. Presenting yourself as confident is not the same as just being confident.
Right. And knowing how that feels. Right?
And it's
internally.
But presenting yourself as confident when you have no confidence is better than just having no confidence. So it's like, it's like trying to, it's like, I don't know. It's like, it's tricky, and I feel bad. I feel bad for men and women, like never have we been so connected. Never has there been so many opportunities to like talk and think and feel and do. And yet there's so much bitterness, resentment, frustration, disenfranchisement. And we keep getting these like surface things as the solution. And nothing could be further from the truth, in my opinion.
I think it's really well said. I think this hour flew by. So we're running towards the end here. I'm curious, if someone feels really inspired by this conversation and they want to pick up the book or they want to do something, they want to take action right away, what can they do? What advice do you have for them, for a guy listening?
I think for a lot of guys, they have no marker, no measure to measure themselves against. Right. And I'm aware that, we live in a world full of different belief systems and everything else. But in my opinion, when I started measuring my character, my ethics, my standards against God, that for me, then I had a line to measure myself against. And that gave me orientation. That gave me a framework that I could actually progress on. I think men need a spiritual orientation. The second thing I think they need is I think they need to develop discipline, and I think they need to cultivate love. Discipline for the sake of love. And love is not just meaning like watching a movie and falling in love. Love means really caring about others, because motivation like that is unlimited. And then lastly, I think men need to hear what women are saying, but don't become like women or don't take on the feminine thing, but actually listen to what's being said. That feedback that has been going on for a long time now, there's truth in it. But the answer isn't just to like agree with everything and become whatever they like. The answer is like take that feedback, apply it, and then create the man that would not resemble the things they're saying. And then, of course, buy my book and everything will be fine. No, it won't, but it's a good start. And you know what? This is a good point. I've done a ton of research on literature, and like men are not reading literature like they used to. I think if men read some literature and started like thinking about the culture and started thinking about how they could contribute to it more and participate in it more, I think we can also get some equilibrium back in our culture. And I think men are avoidant of some of these bigger cultural things that actually shape the conversations we're having. So in that way, I would say, hey, look at my book or look at other books and read these, like start developing more awareness of, history, mythology, myth, sociology, psychology.
Yeah, I think it's really good, to pitch the book a little bit, to keep these ideas top of mind. I still read now, but especially when I was beginning a lot of this men's work stuff, I was listening to books and podcasts and all that nonstop to just keep myself in the mindset, to not fall back into a more cowardly mindset or a more avoidant mindset. Those are kind of two of my flaws that I initially had to work on. It's like having fear win. So listening to people, listening to stories, listening to biographies, listening to novels, that just reminded me that it could be different, where it's really, really helpful.
When men aren't participating in these types of things, they don't have models to follow. If you're just reading like academic books or how to get rich books or how to get fit books, like you're missing out on like the deeper why. And you're also not contributing to the next generation's deeper why. So I think men I think we have a big mountain to climb. And I think it can be really frustrating and sad. And I know a lot of lives have been wrecked because of it. But I think we can look at the mountain, take inventory, take stock, roll up our sleeves, and really get in and participate. And like, it's so clear the work that needs to be done, and we could be excited to do it.
100%. This is a great project. So Magnus, I've really enjoyed having you on the show. I'd love to have you back in the future here. But as we're wrapping up, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and hear more of what you have to say?
Well, the book is called The Men We Make. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I think it's a great book. I've had great feedback. I'm really excited about it. It's vulnerable, it's rough, and it's punchy. And I'd love all the people that give me their feedback, give me the criticisms, or give me their support, because I've really put myself out there with it. And then if you're interested in veterans, mission22.com. We've been going for 15 years. We have all kinds of amazing programs for veterans and family members of veterans. And those are about the two main places. And I really appreciate your time, Mark.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on the show. And listeners, we'll have links to both those in the show notes. So check that out. Order the book. Check out Mission 22. It's a wonderful organization. And the book is fascinating. So give it a read. And, Men's Therapy Podcast is part of Men's Therapy Online. So you know where we're at. We're at menstherapy.online. You check out that website. We have tons of free stuff. We have blogs, podcast entries, online courses, whatever you want to kind of help get your head straight, figure out and build this emotional intelligence piece. We also have a free Slack community, which is like a chat room if you're not familiar with it. We got about 300 active guys on there right now, and we're hoping to get up to 1,000 by the end of the year. So if you're interested, again, there's no cost to that, totally free. If you want to talk with other guys that are working on this kind of stuff, they're trying to be better husbands, better fathers, better men out there. Some of the stuff we've been talking about in this show, jump on there. You're not alone, and we can help you feel like you belong and you can have a place where you can talk with other guys going through it. So check us out, menstherapy.online. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week in another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.